Mason dreamed of stars and ancient cities of crystal spires that reached into violet skies. He dreamed of dragons soaring between floating islands and ships that grew rather than were built. He dreamed of a war that spanned millennia of worlds, consumed and civilizations scattered like seeds across the galaxy. When he woke, the dreams lingered, their images more vivid than any he had experienced before. Mason sat up on the living bed that had formed from the ship's hull. The surface shifted, beneath him responding to his movements. Lyra stood at the navigation crystal. Her silver eyes focused on the displays hovering in the air above it. She did not look like she had slept. Her posture remained perfect. Her attention unwavering. Ember lay. Nearby, his injured leg still encased in crystal, but the blackened scales had begun to fade, returning to their normal blue. "How long was I asleep?" Mason asked. 20 hours. Lyra replied without turning. "Our journey through fold space continues without incident 20 hours. Mason repeated, surprised. He rarely slept more than 6 or 7. The neural connection with the ship must have drained him more than he realized. "You needed to recover," Lyra said. "Your mind is strong, but untrained." The ship connection taxes your energy reserves. Mason stood stretching muscles that felt strangely refreshed despite the long sleep. The ship had monitored his vital signs. Lyra had said, perhaps it had also influenced his rest somehow. "Where exactly are we going?" Mason asked, approaching the crystal console. Lyra gestured to the view screen, which showed a representation of their path through fold space. A red line curved through swirling colors, heading toward a bright point of light. "That is our destination," Lyra explained. "The primary beacon lies hidden on a world your astronomers have not yet catalogued, a gas giant with 17 moons. The beacon is buried deep within the core of the smallest moon. How did you hide something so important?" Mason asked. "The beacon was designed to appear dormant," Lyra explained. "It registers as a natural formation on scanning equipment. Its true nature is concealed by technology even the Vorsec cannot detect. But it required the activation codes from the navigation crystal you prepared." The final key. Mason studied the display, noting the estimated time until arrival, just over 2 days. "Then we activate this beacon and wake your people?" Lyra nodded. "Then the gathering begins. The Eldrith will emerge from stasis chambers across thousands of worlds. Our fleet will reassemble. Our allies will be contacted, and Earth." Mason prompted, "Will my world be involved?" "That depends on you," Lyra said, turning to face him fully. "You have become part of this, Mason Bell, in ways I did not anticipate. The neural connection between you and the Astralis is stronger than it should be. You have seen into the ship memories. You know more of my people than any human has in millennia. Is that a problem?" Mason asked. "Not a problem," Lyra replied. "An opportunity. The Eldrith Council will need to understand humans if we are to form an alliance. I had intended to simply collect data from your neural patterns. But now you can speak for your people directly. You can help shape the alliance." Mason stared at her. "You want me to be some kind of ambassador?" "Not officially," Lyra said. "But your perspective would be valuable. The Council respects those who demonstrate courage and loyalty. You showed both when you saved Ember." The dragon raised his head at the mention of his name. His eyes fixed on Mason with that same intelligent awareness Mason had noticed before Ember made a series of clicking sounds that seemed approving. "He says you have the soul of a Skywalker," Lyra translated, a high compliment among dragonkind. Mason smiled uncertainly at the creature. "Thank you, I think." Ember lowered his head again, the crystal casing around his leg cracking slightly as he shifted position. The healing was progressing. "Well, tell me more about your people," Mason said, moving to stand beside Lyra at the console. "You said the Eldrith are ancient. How old exactly?" "Our civilization began over 50,000 of your years ago," Lyra replied. "The earliest Eldrith evolved on a world with 2 suns and 3 moons. Our biology adapted to handle complex gravitational forces. Our minds developed to process multiple simultaneous realities. Is that why you can navigate fold space?" Mason asked. "Partly," Lyra agreed. "Fold space exists between dimensions. It requires a mind that can conceptualize nonlinear reality. The Eldrith brain is structured differently than yours. We perceive time and space as fluid rather than fixed. And the dragons. Mason looked at Ember. How do they fit into your society? The dragons were created 15,000 years ago, Lyra said. When we began exploring beyond our home system, we encountered many hostile species. We needed companions who could adapt to different environments, who could protect us during exploration. The dragons were engineered from genetic material, gathered from a dozen worlds. Their base template came from Earth reptiles we encountered during our early visits to your planet. Mason tried to imagine Earth dinosaurs combined with alien DNA to create the creatures of legend. You made them intelligent. Intelligence was essential. Lyra confirmed a guardian must be able to make complex decisions to understand strategy and tactics. Dragons are not servants. They are partners. Their relationship with the Eldrith is symbiotic. Each dragon bonds with an Eldrith, sharing a mental connection that spans lifetimes, like you and Ember, Mason said. Lyra nodded. Her expression softened as she looked at the resting dragon. We have been together for 4 centuries. He has saved my life more times than I can count. 400 years, Mason shook his head, unable to truly comprehend such a lifespan. How long do your people live? Under optimal conditions, an Eldrith can live for 2,000 years. Lyra said, dragons slightly less, perhaps 1,500. But few of us reach our natural end. The war with the Vorsek has claimed many lives, and you? Mason asked, studying her ageless face. How old are you? Lyra was quiet for a moment. The question seemed to disturb her. By your calendar, I was born 627 years ago. Mason tried to process this information. Lyra had been alive during Earth's Middle Ages, had witnessed the Renaissance, the Industrial Revolution, 2 world wars, the beginning of space exploration. She had lived through all of it while carrying the burden of her people's survival. The view screen flickered, suddenly showing a disturbance in the fold space ahead of them. Lyra frowned, pressing her hands to the navigation crystal. The ship responded, displays shifting to show more detail. Patrol, Lyra said. A Vorsek scout ship crossed our path recently. Their wake disturbs the fold space currents. Can they detect us? Mason asked. Not directly, Lyra replied. But they may sense our passage if we come too close. We must adjust our course, sire. Closed her eyes, concentrating. The ship hummed in response, the walls pulsing with a new rhythm. The red line on the view screen curved away from the disturbance. The detour will add 6 hours to our journey, Lyra said, opening her eyes. We cannot risk detection, not when we are so close to our goal. Ember stirred suddenly. The dragon lifted his head scales, shifting from blue to amber. A warning. Mason realized. Something troubles him, Lyra said, watching the dragon carefully. Ember rose to his feet, the crystal casing around his injured leg cracking and falling away. The limb was healed, though the scales remained lighter in color than the rest. He made a series of urgent clicking sounds, moving toward the navigation console. Lyra listened, her expression growing concerned. He senses something, she told Mason. Something following us, but you removed the tracker. Mason said, it is not a tracker. Ember believes, Lyra explained. The dragon pressed his snout against a section of wall which opened to reveal a different control system. This one appeared older, with physical components rather than the crystalline interfaces of the main console. This is a sensor array, Lyra said, running her hands over the controls. It detects disturbances in the quantum field that underlies fold space. The Vorsek should not have this technology. The display showed empty space behind them, but as Lyra adjusted the settings, a faint shadow appeared, something moving through fold space on the exact path they had taken. It's another ship, Mason said. Lyra nodded, but not Vorsek. Their vessels leave distinct energy signatures. This is different. More subtle. Almost as if the ship hiding in their wake suddenly accelerated. The sensor display flared with warnings as the vessel closed. The distance between them. Lyra stepped back from the console, her expression shocked. Impossible, she whispered. "What is it?" Mason asked, alarmed by her reaction. "The signal, the energy pattern," Lyra said. "It matches." "Eldrith technology, another living ship?" Mason asked. Lyra shook her head. "No, something else. Something I have not seen in centuries." The view screen changed, showing not the swirling colors of fold space, but a direct view behind them. The pursuing vessel was now visible. A sleek craft with angles, like folded paper. Its hull gleamed silver, reflecting the strange energies of fold space. "It signals us," Lyra said. Her hands moved across the crystal, accepting the communication. The view screen shifted again, and Mason found himself looking at another, Eldrith. The similarities to Lyra were obvious. The same pointed ears, the same ageless quality. But this was male, with eyes that burned gold rather than silver, and hair so pale it was almost white. "Navareth," Lyra said. Her voice held a complex mix of emotion, surprise, suspicion, and something deeper. "My queen," the male Eldrith replied, bowing his head slightly. "I have found you at last." Lyra did not smile. "How did you escape the purge of the southern continent?" "I saw the cities fall myself." "I was not there," Navareth replied. "I was off-world with the research team. When we returned, we found only ruins. I have been searching for survivors ever since." Lyra studied him. The Astralis moved like a living creature, twisting through fold space with a grace that defied physics. Mason felt every motion through his connection to the navigation crystal. The ship's consciousness brushed against his mind, guiding his thoughts, showing him how to plot their course. The Vorsek hunter vessel followed relentlessly. Its weapons fired bursts of sickly green energy that tore through the fabric of fold space itself. Each near miss sent ripples of pain through the ship and through Mason by extension. "They should not be able to track us here." Lyra said, her voice tight with concentration. "Not so precisely." She stood beside Mason, her hands also pressed to the crystal, sharing the burden of navigation. The mental connection between them flowed both ways now, and Mason caught glimpses of her thoughts. Her concern was not just for herself, but for entire civilizations waiting in stasis, dependent on her survival. Ember prowled the bridge, his armored scales fully extended. The dragon watched the view screen with intelligent eyes, occasionally making clicking sounds that Mason now recognized as a language. "How are they following us?" Mason asked, as they narrowly avoided another energy burst. "They must have placed a tracker on the hull during the station attack," Lyra replied. "We cannot outrun them forever." Mason searched through the ship systems using his connection to the crystal. "They're finding it." The Astralis showed him an image of their hull with a small blinking light attached near the propulsion area. "There's something on us," Mason confirmed. "Can we remove it?" "Not while in fold space," Lyra said. "The hull is our only protection from the dimensional energies outside. To breach it would be fatal." Another energy burst struck, closer this time, grazing the rear section of the ship. Mason gasped, feeling the damage as a burning sensation across his back. The ship shuddered, and alarms flashed across the crystal surface. "We need to exit fold space," Mason said. "We need normal space to deal with the tracker." Lyra shook her head. "The moment we emerge, they will call reinforcements. We will be surrounded. Better surrounded tomorrow than dead today," Mason argued. Lyra looked at him for a long moment, then nodded. "You have courage, Mason. Bell, very well." She pressed her hands firmly against the crystal, and Mason felt the ship systems reconfigure. The swirling colors on the view screen began to stabilize as the Astralis prepared to return to normal space. The transition hit Mason like a physical blow. Pressure built in his ears and behind his eyes as reality reasserted itself. Stars reappeared on the view screen, solid and unchanging. The vastness of normal space spread out before them. "Where are we?" Mason asked, removing his hands from the crystal and trying to orient himself. "Far from your station," Lyra replied. 10 light years at least in a system with no inhabited planets. The Vorsek will follow, but we have perhaps minutes before they emerge." Ember made a series of urgent, clicking sounds. The dragon moved to a wall panel and pressed his snout against it. The panel slid open, revealing what appeared to be a storage area. Lyra nodded. Yes, we must hurry. She pulled a silvery suit from the storage area and held it out to Mason. Put this on, it will protect you in vacuum. Mason took the suit. It felt impossibly light in his hands, almost like liquid metal. Are we going outside to remove the tracker? Yes. Lyra confirmed. The ship cannot heal while it remains attached. Mason quickly pulled the suit over his clothes. It molded to his body automatically, sealing at wrists and ankles. The helmet was a transparent bubble that emerged from the collar when Lyra touched a control on his shoulder. Ember will go with you, Lyra, said the dragon can survive brief exposure to space. His scales provide sufficient protection. Mason looked at the massive creature doubtfully. How exactly will he help? Ember understands the ship's biology better than you do, Lyra explained. He can help. Remove the tracker without causing further damage to the hull. Mason nodded, though the idea of spacewalking with a dragon seemed absurd. The situation had long since passed the bounds of normality. Anyway, Lyra led them to an airlock near the rear of the ship. The dragon followed, pressing close to Mason's side. As they walked, Mason noticed the walls pulsing with a faster rhythm than before. The ship is afraid, Mason realized. Yes, Lyra confirmed. The Astralis remembers the last Hunter attack. Lost many sister ships in that battle. The airlock was unlike any Mason had seen before. A section of the hull simply thinned, becoming transparent, showing the stars beyond. The outer door does not open, Lyra explained. Instead, the hull becomes permeable. You will pass through it. Ember will guide you. Mason swallowed nervously. Will I feel it? Only briefly, Lyra assured him. The sensation is strange but not painful. She handed Mason a tool that looked something like a scalpel, though its edge glowed with a blue light. Use this to cut the tracker free. Do not touch it with your hands. The Vorsek use biological components that can bond with other living tissue. Mason took the tool carefully. Where exactly is the tracker? Lyra touched a control panel beside the airlock. A holographic image appeared showing the Astralis with a blinking red dot near the aft section. There it is, attached to the primary propulsion node. Ember made a clicking sound and nudged Mason toward the airlock. The dragon seemed impatient. They are coming, Lyra confirmed. We have very little time. Mason stepped into the airlock chamber, Ember squeezing in beside him. The transparent section shimmered now, looking almost liquid. Remember, Mason, Lyra said through the intercom. Cut around the tracker, not through it. The ship will heal the incision once the tracker is removed. Mason nodded. The air pressure changed subtly as the inner door sealed. The transparent section before him rippled like water. Now Lyra commanded pass through quickly. Mason took a deep breath and stepped forward into the rippling surface. The sensation was indescribable, like pushing through thick gel that tingled against every nerve. The ship's hull parted around him, letting him pass molecule by molecule. For a terrifying moment, he was neither inside nor outside, but part of the hull itself. Then he was through, floating in open space. The stars spread out in all directions, impossibly bright without atmospheric interference. The Astralis hovered before him, its black hull gleaming in the light of a distant sun. Ember emerged beside him, the dragon moving with surprising grace in zero gravity. His scales had changed again, taking on a metallic quality that reflected starlight. The creature gestured with one clawed limb pointing toward the rear of the ship. Mason activated the propulsion system in his suit, moving carefully along the hull. The tracker was visible now, a small disc about the size of his palm. It pulsed with a sickly green light that reminded him of the Vorsek weapons. The area around it had turned gray, the ship's living tissue clearly damaged by contact. Ember moved ahead of him, reaching the tracker first. The dragon examined it, making those clicking sounds that seemed to be communication. Mason wondered if the creature was talking to the ship. Mason approached with the cutting tool. The tracker had embedded thin tendrils into the ship's hull like roots seeking soil. He would need to cut each one carefully to free the device. Working. Quickly, Mason began to slice through the tendrils. Each cut released a small puff of greenish fluid that froze instantly in the vacuum. The ship shuddered slightly as if in pain, but remained still, allowing him to work. Ember watched closely occasionally, using a claw to point out a tendril Mason had missed. The last tendril was thicker than the others and had penetrated deeper into the hull. Mason had to lean close, using both hands to guide the cutting tool. The tracker pulsed faster, as if sensing its imminent removal. Almost got it. Mason muttered, though no one could hear him in the vacuum. The final tendril parted with a snap, and the tracker floated free. Ember immediately batted it away with a powerful sweep of his tail. The device tumbled into space, spiraling away from the ship. The dragon made an urgent gesture back toward the airlock. Just as Mason turned to look, he saw a tear forming in space nearby. The fabric of reality split open, and the angular prow of a Vorsek ship began to emerge. Lyra's voice came through his helmet comm. "They are here." Mason activated his suit's thrusters at maximum power, racing back toward the airlock. Ember beside him, the dragon seemed to be having trouble keeping up, his massive body less maneuverable in space. The Vorsek ship fully emerged from fold space. Its weapons ports glowed green as they powered up targeting systems. Locking onto the Astralis, Mason reached the transparent section of hull and pushed against it. The surface resisted for a moment, then began to soften, allowing him to pass through. He turned back to see Ember still several meters away, the dragon struggling against what appeared to be some kind of tractor beam from the Vorsek ship. The hunter vessel fired. A burst of green energy streaked toward the dragon. Ember twisted, attempting to avoid it, but the beam caught his rear leg. The dragon's scales blackened and he tumbled helplessly. Without thinking, Mason pushed back out through the hull. He had to reach Ember. The dragon had saved his life at the station, had protected him during their escape. Mason could not leave him behind. The Vorsek fired again. Another beam headed directly for Ember. Mason reached the dragon just in time, grabbing one of his armored spines and activating his suit's emergency thrusters. The sudden acceleration threw them both sideways. The energy beam missed by centimeters. Ember was heavy, too heavy for Mason's suit thrusters to move effectively. The dragon seemed partially paralyzed, the hit leg now completely black and unresponsive. Mason struggled, pulling with all his strength, trying to drag them both back toward the airlock. The Astralis moved suddenly, the entire ship rotating to place its. The attack on Lunar Station 9 happened so fast, Mason barely had time to think. 3 massive ships appeared on the station scanners, their hulls black and angular like predatory insects. They moved with frightening speed, surrounding the station. In moments, Mason watched through the view screen as Lyra commanded her vessel. The walls around him pulsed with energy, as if the ship itself was afraid. The crystal control panel flared with symbols that shifted and changed too quickly for Mason to comprehend. "We cannot stay," Lyra said. Her voice remained calm, but Mason saw tension in her shoulders. "The Vorsek will destroy this station to reach us." Mason looked at her in alarm. "Who are the Vorsek? Why would they destroy the station hunters?" Lyra replied. Her fingers danced across the crystal surface. "They collect technology and rare species. They care nothing for those who stand in their way." Through the view screen, Mason saw the first enemy vessel fire a beam of sickly green light. It struck the outer ring of the station, cutting through the metal like it was paper. Alarms blared louder as the station emergency systems tried to contain the damage. "You said they want you," Mason said. While Lyra turned to him, her silver eyes now glowing with an inner fire. "They want what I protect, what I am." She gestured at the ship around them. "This vessel is not merely transportation. It is a key, a final piece." Ember. The dragon moved to Mason's side. His scales had changed completely, now covered with crystalline growths that formed a natural armor. The creature lowered himself as if offering Mason a place on his back. "You must decide," Lyra said. "They will not harm your people if we leave. They only want us. But once we go, we cannot return." Mason thought of his repair shop, his tools, his life on the station. It was simple and predictable and safe. Looking at Lyra and her dragon, he knew that whatever journey they offered would be none of those things. Another explosion rocked the station closer this time. Mason could hear the screams of people running for safety. His decision crystallized in that moment. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Lyra smiled, showing those slightly too sharp teeth. "Place your hands on the navigation crystal. Focus your thoughts on movement and safety." Mason did as she instructed, pressing his palms against the warm crystal surface. The connection was immediate and intense, far stronger than before. The ship seemed to recognize him now, images flooding his mind, stars and paths, and strange geometries that made his head spin. Ember made a chirping sound and nudged Mason with his massive head. "He offers protection," Lyra explained. "The neural connection can be overwhelming at first." Mason nodded, feeling dizzy. The dragon moved closer, allowing Mason to lean against his armored side. The contact helped, somehow grounding him as the ship systems flowed through his mind. Lyra touched a different crystal, and the ship hummed with power. The walls pulsed faster now with a rhythm that reminded Mason of a racing heartbeat. The floor beneath his feet vibrated. "Hold tight," Lyra warned. The ship moved, suddenly breaking free from the docking clamps, with a screech of tearing metal. Mason felt the movement in his mind as much as his body. The navigation crystal showed him their path. A twisting escape route between the enemy vessel's station control was shouting over the comm system, demanding they stop. But Lyra ignored them, focused entirely on their escape. Ember wrapped his tail around Mason, keeping him steady as the ship accelerated. Through the view screen, Mason watched Lunar Station 9 fall behind them, growing smaller as they raced toward open space. The three enemy ships immediately changed course, abandoning their attack on the station to pursue Lyra's vessel. "They're following us," Mason said. "Of course," Lyra replied. "We are the prize." The ship shuddered as a green beam grazed their hull. Mason felt the injury like a burning along his arm. The neural connection was making him experience the ship's damage as his own. "Can this ship outrun them?" he asked, trying to ignore the phantom pain. "Not in normal space," Lyra said, "but we do not need to." She pressed both hands against the navigation crystal, joining Mason in the connection. Their minds touched briefly, and Mason gasped. The depth and complexity of her thoughts stunned him. Images, memories, and emotions not his own cascaded through his consciousness. Lyra was old, far older than any human could be. Her memories stretched back centuries. She had visited hundreds of worlds, fought in wars Mason could barely comprehend, seen the rise and fall of entire civilizations, and always, she carried the burden of some great purpose. The ship suddenly lurched as Lyra activated a system Mason had not yet discovered. The space around them seemed to bend and twist. Stars stretched into lines of light. The pursuing vessels grew distorted in the viewscreen fold space. Lyra announced, "We travel between the layers of reality." Mason felt the transition as a moment of impossible pressure followed by weightless euphoria. The viewscreen showed nothing, now just swirling colors that hurt his eyes to look at directly. The crystal beneath his hands pulsed steadily, guiding them through whatever strange dimension they had entered, safe for now. Lyra said, removing her hands from the crystal. Mason did the same, feeling the connection fade. His mind felt strangely empty. Without the ship's presence, will they follow us here? Mason asked. Not immediately, Lyra replied. The Vorsek cannot navigate fold space as efficiently as my people, but they will find us again. Eventually. She turned to him fully, now studying his face. You have questions? Mason laughed, a short sound, with little humor. Yes, I have questions. You look like something from Earth legend but claim to be alien. Your ship is alive. Your pet is a dragon, and we just fled from attackers who destroyed half a space station just to reach you. So yes, I have questions. Lyra nodded. I will answer what I can, but first we must tend to the ship. It was damaged in our escape. The reminder of the ship's injury brought back the phantom pain in Mason's arm. He looked down, half expecting to see a burn, but his skin was unmarked. You felt it, Lyra observed. This is unusual. The ship rarely bonds with strangers. Ember made a rumbling sound that might have been agreement. The dragon had retracted some of his armor now that they were safe. His scales shifted back to a calm blue. The ship took damage here, Lyra said, leading Mason to a section of wall near the rear of the vessel. The smooth surface was discolored. A patch roughly the size of a dinner plate had turned from shimmering black to dull gray. Can it be repaired? Mason asked. It can heal with assistance, Lyra explained. The ship is partially organic, a living vessel grown rather than built, but it needs energy and guidance. She placed her hand on the damaged section and closed her eyes. The wall pulsed beneath her touch, but the gray patch remained. I am too weakened from the escape, she said, opening her eyes. You must help. The ship knows you now. It will accept your energy. Mason hesitated, then placed his hand beside Lyra's on the damaged section. The wall felt warm, almost feverish under his palm. Focus your intent, Lyra instructed. Visualize wholeness. Health, repair. Mason closed his eyes, trying to picture the wall restored to its original state. To his surprise, he could feel something responding. To his thoughts, the ship material shifted under his hand, becoming more fluid. The damaged section warmed further. Good, Lyra encouraged. Keep your focus. Mason concentrated harder, imagining energy flowing from his body into the ship. The effort was exhausting, but gradually he felt the wall changing beneath his touch. When he finally opened his eyes, the gray patch had shrunk by half. Lyra looked at him with new interest. You have strong mental patterns for a human. The ship responds well to you. Mason pulled his hand away, feeling suddenly drained. What exactly is this vessel? Lyra ran her fingers along the now partially healed wall. The Astralis is a living ship, last of its kind. It was grown from the genetic material of an ancient species that existed before my people began traveling the stars. It is alive, conscious in its own way. How old is it? Mason asked. Over 12,000 years by your calendar, Lyra replied. The ship has been my home and companion for the last 6 centuries. Mason tried to wrap his mind around such time spans. 600 years. You said your people were refugees on Earth. How long ago was that? Lyra moved to a different panel in the wall, which opened at her touch, revealing what appeared to be a food preparation area. My people, the Eldrith, visited your world approximately 8,000 years ago. We stayed for 3 centuries before the first Vorsek scouts found us. She handed Mason a small container filled with a blue liquid. Drink, this will restore your energy. Mason accepted the container hesitantly, but the events of the day had left him too exhausted to be cautious. The liquid tasted like honey and mint, with an underlying spice he couldn't identify. Warmth spread through his body, immediately easing his fatigue. The stories of elves, Mason said. They came from your people. Some did, Lyra confirmed. The hidden folk, the fair ones, children who saw us in the forests, humans who encountered us by accident. Your kind has a remarkable ability to transform fact into mythology within just a few generations, and dragons. Mason looked at Ember, who was curled in a corner of the room, watching them with intelligent eyes. A genetic creation of my people, Lyra explained. We combined material from Earth reptiles with our own biology to create companions and protectors. The dragons, as you call them, are intelligent and loyal with lifespans that match our own. Ember has been with me for 400 years. Mason struggled to process everything she was telling him. If you left Earth thousands of years ago, why were you at Lunar Station 9? Why did you need me to fix your ship? Lyra was silent for a long moment. The question seemed to trouble her. Finally, she sighed, a very human gesture. Mason Bell wiped sweat from his forehead as he finished working on the engine of a small cargo ship. The space station hummed with activity around him, but his repair bay felt like his own world, a place where he could solve problems with his hands and tools. The overhead lights flickered slightly, as they always did during the station power cycle. Mason hardly noticed it anymore after 5 years on Lunar Station 9. He had built a reputation as the mechanic who could fix anything, no matter how strange or complex the machine. Mason found a way to make it work again. His comm unit buzzed with a message from Diane, the station traffic controller. Mason, we have an unscheduled arrival requesting your dock specifically. Looks like a private vessel. Not in our system records. Want me to send them your way? Mason looked around his workshop. Tools lay scattered from his last job, and he had planned to organize everything before taking on new work. But curiosity won over tidiness. Send them in, he replied, grabbing a rag to clean engine grease off his hands. He wondered who would arrive without an appointment, especially in an unregistered ship. The docking alert sounded, and Mason walked to the large bay window that overlooked the arrival area. What he saw made him freeze mid-step. The ship gliding into his dock looked unlike any vessel he had ever seen. It was not large, perhaps twice the size of a standard shuttle, but its design was strange. The hull appeared to be made of a material that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. The ship had no visible thrusters or engines yet. It moved with perfect control. Its shape reminded Mason of ancient sea creatures he had seen in history books, smooth and curved with no sharp edges. The ship settled onto the docking pad without a sound. No hiss of hydraulics, no thud of landing gear, just perfect, silent stillness. Mason approached cautiously, searching for some kind of hatch or door, but the seamless hull revealed nothing. He circled the vessel twice, finding no obvious way inside. Just as he was about to call station security, the surface of the hull shifted. A section of the black material rippled like water, and then simply vanished, revealing an opening. Mason stepped back surprised by the strange technology. Light spilled from the opening, bathing the dock in a soft purple glow. A figure appeared in the doorway, and Mason felt his heart beat faster. She was tall, much taller than any human woman, with a slender frame that moved with impossible grace. Her skin had a faint silvery sheen, and her ears tapered to delicate points. Her eyes shifted color as she looked at him, moving from deep violet to shimmering silver. She wore what appeared to be a fitted jumpsuit made of material, similar to her ship, with symbols etched along the sleeves that glowed faintly. Mason had seen many different people from many worlds, but never anyone like her. She looked like something from old Earth stories, an elf stepped out of ancient legend. "Welcome, mechanic," she said. Her voice had a musical quality that seemed to bypass his ears and resonate directly in his mind. "I am Lyra, and I require your expertise." Mason found his voice despite his surprise. "You know my name. Your reputation reaches farther than you imagine," Mason Bell Lyra replied, stepping onto the dock with fluid grace. Her feet made no sound on the metal floor. "My vessel requires attention that only your particular skills can provide." Mason glanced at the strange ship, then back at the even stranger visitor. "I work on all kinds of ships, but yours is well different. Different is precisely why I sought you out," Lyra said. She gestured toward the opening. "Come see what needs repair." Mason hesitated. Years of working in space had taught him caution, especially with unknown technology and unfamiliar clients, but his curiosity was too strong to resist. He followed Lyra toward the ship entrance. As they approached the opening, Mason heard a low rumbling sound from inside the vessel. The sound made the hair on his arms stand up. It was not mechanical, not like any engine or system he knew. It sounded alive. Lyra paused at the threshold. "My companion travels with me. She said he is protective but will not harm you if you show no fear." "Companion?" Mason asked, just as a large shape moved in the shadows beyond the doorway. A head emerged from the darkness, and Mason stumbled backward. The creature was massive, with a long serpentine neck and a head that resembled ancient reptiles from Earth history. Its scales shifted colors as it watched him, moving from deep blue to a curious amber. Its eyes were intelligent and focused entirely on Mason. "This is Ember," Lyra said, as if introducing an ordinary pet. "Not a creature from myth?" The dragon, for Mason could think of it as nothing else, tilted its head and made a chirping sound. Mason stared, unable to process what he was seeing. A woman who looked like an elf and a creature that resembled a dragon had arrived at his repair shop in a ship that defied known physics. "Perhaps I have chosen wrongly," Lyra said, watching his reaction. "There are other mechanics on this station." The thought of this strange pair seeking help elsewhere snapped Mason out of his shock. "No," he said quickly. "I can help. I just need to understand what I am working with." Lyra smiled, revealing teeth that were just slightly too sharp to be human. "Good," she said. Follow me. The interior of the ship was even stranger than its exterior. The corridors seemed to adjust their size as they walked, widening slightly for the dragon who padded silently behind them. The walls glowed with a soft light that had no visible source, and the floor felt slightly springy beneath Mason's boots. There are no seams, Mason observed, running his hand along a wall. No panels or access points. How do you maintain the systems? The ship is not built like your vessels, Lyra explained. It grows and heals, but some injuries require assistance. She led him into what appeared to be the control room, though it contained no recognizable instruments. Just smooth surfaces with those same strange glowing symbols. The navigation system is damaged, Lyra explained, placing her hand on what looked like a large crystal embedded in the central console. We encountered an energy storm 3 cycles ago. The ship can still travel but cannot properly calculate safe passages through fold space. Mason approached the crystal cautiously. What exactly do you need me to do? Learn the ship, Lyra said simply. Understand its patterns. Feel its needs, fix what is broken. Mason wanted to explain that he worked with metal and circuitry, with engines and power cores, not with whatever organic technology this vessel used. But something about the strange ship called to him. He had always had an intuitive understanding of machines, a talent that went beyond technical knowledge. Perhaps this was just another kind of machine, one he had not encountered before. How long will the repairs take? Lyra asked. I honestly don't know, Mason admitted, but I will try. Good, Lyra said, nodding as if she had expected no other answer. We have 7 days before we must continue our journey. That should be sufficient. Mason was not so sure, but he nodded anyway. The dragon ember made a rumbling sound that vibrated through the floor. He approves of you, Lyra said. The dragon moved closer to Mason, its massive head now level with his chest. Mason stood very still as the creature sniffed him, its nostrils flaring. Ember huffed a breath that smelled strangely like cinnamon and ozone, then turned and padded away down a corridor. You should begin, Lyra said. She touched the crystal again and it pulsed with light. We will stay aboard while you work. The ship responds better when we remain connected. Mason nodded, trying to look more confident than he felt. I need to get my tools. As Mason turned to leave the ship, his mind raced. What kind of tools would even work on this vessel? What was he getting himself into? He had no experience with living ships or with clients who looked like characters from storybooks. But the challenge intrigued him. Back in his workshop, Mason gathered his diagnostic equipment and basic tools, unsure what would be useful. He noticed the station security officer, Gwen, watching from across. The dock, everything okay with your new clients? She called, her hand resting casually near her stunner. All fine, Mason replied, not wanting to draw attention to Lyra and her unusual companion. Just a routine repair job. Gwen nodded, but her expression remained suspicious. Take care, Belle. That ship doesn't match any known registry. I always do, Mason said with a forced smile. As Gwen walked away, Mason took a deep breath and headed back toward the strange ship. The door opened as he approached, as if it sensed him coming. Inside, Lyra waited, her silver eyes watching him with ancient patience. The crystal control panel pulsed with a rhythm that reminded Mason of a heartbeat. He set down his tools and reached toward the crystal surface. The moment his fingers touched it, images flooded his mind, stars and planets, strange cities made of crystal and living matter, vast fleets of ships like this one moving through space. Then darkness, energy storms, warfare, and hiding. Always hiding. Mason pulled, his hand back, startled. The crystal had shown him something important. He reached out again, this time prepared for the connection. The ship was trying to communicate with him. This is going to be interesting, Mason thought as the living vessel welcomed him into its systems. He had no idea how right he was. The first day passed quickly as Mason worked to understand the strange technology. The crystal responded to his touch, growing warmer when he moved in the right direction with his repairs, and cooler when he made mistakes. It was like the ship itself guided his hands, Lyra appeared occasionally watching his progress without comment. The Dragon Ember prowled the docks at night, keeping guard. Mason realized, though, against what he did, not know. On the second night, as the station lights dimmed to simulate evening, Mason sat alone in the control room trying to decipher the crystal patterns. Fatigue clouded his. The Astralis hurtled through fold space at maximum speed. The living ship pushed its systems beyond safe limits, responding to the urgency of their situation. The walls pulsed with a frantic rhythm that matched Mason's racing heartbeat. Lyra stood at the navigation crystal. Her hands pressed firmly against its surface. Her silver eyes were closed in concentration as she guided the ship through the treacherous currents of between space. Mason worked beside her, his own connection to the ship growing stronger with each passing hour. Ember prowled the bridge, his scales shifting between combat red and alert amber. The dragon's movements were agitated, his senses stretched to their limits, searching for pursuit. "How close are they?" Mason asked. "Too close," Lyra replied. "They know our destination. They will converge on the beacon moon in force." "Can we get there first?" "The Astralis is faster than their vessels," Lyra said. "But they have numbers. They can afford to sacrifice ships to slow us down," as if summoned. By her words, the ship sensors detected a disturbance ahead. Something large had entered fold space directly in their path. Vorsec blockade. Lyra said. The view screen showed 3 hunter ships arranged in a defensive formation. Their hulls bristled with weapons, all trained on the path the Astralis must take. They predicted our route. Mason realized. The most direct path to the beacon moon. "Yes," Lyra agreed. "We must go around. The detour will cost us time." Mason said, "Time we don't have." "There is another option," Lyra admitted, though it carries great risk. "We can go through," Mason repeated, staring at the 3 massive warships through them. "Not physically," Lyra clarified. "The Astralis has a defense mechanism one rarely used. The ship can phase shift, moving partially out of normal space. Even while in fold space, it would allow us to pass through their blockade without physical contact." "What's the risk?" Mason asked. "The energy cost is enormous," Lyra explained. "It will drain our reserves, leaving us vulnerable upon arrival. And the process is painful for the ship. The ship is alive." Mason reminded her. "It should have a choice." Lyra looked at him with surprise, then nodded. "You are right." She placed both hands on the navigation crystal, closing her eyes. "Astralis," she said aloud. "Will you attempt the phase shift?" The crystal pulsed beneath her fingers, glowing with inner light. The walls around them changed color, shifting from their normal black to a deep purple acceptance. Mason realized the ship was agreeing. "Prepare yourself," Lyra warned Mason. "This will affect you through your neural connection." Mason nodded, placing his own hands on the crystal beside hers. Ember moved closer, wrapping his tail around Mason's legs, offering support. The ship hummed, the sound rising in pitch until it became almost painful. Mason's skin tingled with static electricity. His vision blurred, the edges of the bridge seeming to dissolve into mist. The Astralis was changing, becoming less solid. It began slowly, a sensation of lightness, as if gravity was failing. Then came the pain. A burning that started in Mason's fingertips and raced up his arms, spreading throughout his body. Every cell seemed to vibrate, threatening to come apart. The ship's pain became his pain as the phase shift tore at the molecular bonds holding the Astralis together. Mason gritted his teeth, forcing himself to maintain contact with the crystal. The view screen showed their approach to the Vorsec blockade. The enemy ships grew larger, their weapons firing, bursts of green energy that passed harmlessly through the Astralis' ghostly form. "We are between states," Lyra explained, her voice strained. "Between matter and energy. They cannot touch us." The Astralis glided through the first Vorsec vessel, passing through, its hull like a phantom. The enemy ship tried to adjust, firing wildly, but the Astralis was already moving through the second vessel, then the third. The blockade had failed. The pain peaked as they cleared the last ship. Mason felt as if his body was tearing apart, then suddenly everything snapped back into focus. The Astralis rematerialized the walls, returning to their normal, shimmering black. The pain vanished, leaving Mason gasping for breath. Lyra removed her hands from the crystal. The effort had taken a toll on her as well. Her ageless face showed signs of fatigue lines appearing around her eyes. "The ship needs time to recover," she said. "But we have none to give. The beacon moon awaits." The view screen changed, showing their position in fold space. The bright point that marked their destination was much closer now. A few hours at most, and they would reach the primary beacon. "Will the Vorsek follow us through the blockade?" Mason asked. "They will pursue," Lyra confirmed. "But we have gained precious time." The phase shift confused their sensors. "They cannot track us as efficiently now." Mason studied the ship systems through his neural connection. The Astralis energy reserves were dangerously low. The phase shift had drained more power than he expected. "We need to conserve energy," he said. "Redirecting power from non-essential systems to propulsion and shields. The beacon activation will require significant power as well." Lyra nodded, approving his actions. "You think like an Eldrith engineer, high?" Praise coming from someone 600 years old. Mason replied with a tired smile. Ember made a series of clicking sounds that might have been laughter. The dragon had returned to his normal blue coloration, the immediate danger having passed as they continued toward the beacon moon. Mason thought about everything that had happened since Lyra arrived at his repair bay. He had gone from a simple mechanic to a participant in an ancient war. His life had been completely upended, and yet he felt more alive, more purposeful than ever before. "What happens after?" Mason asked. "We activate the beacon, wake your people, then what?" "Then we fight," Lyra said. "The Eldrith emerge from stasis ready for war. Our ships, our technology, our knowledge combined with allies across the galaxy and Earth." Mason prompted. "Where does my world fit into this?" Lyra was silent for a moment, considering Earth stands at a crossroads. She finally said, "Your people have begun to explore beyond your solar system, but you remain unaware of the larger conflicts that shape the galaxy. The Vorsek would see your world as simply another resource to be harvested, but you could warn them." Mason said, "We could prepare." "Yes." Lyra agreed. "That was always part of my plan. Earth holds a special place in Eldrith history. Our peoples are connected in ways few understand. The dragons themselves carry Earth genetics. Your world has potential that even my people do not fully comprehend." The ship alarms sounded suddenly, the sensors detecting new threats. The view screen showed multiple Vorsek vessels emerging from fold space behind them. The hunters had found their trail again. "They are gaining," Lyra said. "The Astralis cannot outrun them in its weakened state. We must reach the beacon moon before they overtake us." Mason redirected the last reserves of power to the propulsion systems. The ship surged forward, its living walls pulsing with effort. Ember moved to a secondary crystal array, placing his clawed hand upon it. The dragon was sharing his own energy with the ship. Mason realized a true symbiosis. The fold space around them began to thin, the swirling colors on the view screen stabilizing as they approached transition. "Back to normal space. Prepare for emergence," Lyra warned. "We will arrive directly in orbit of the beacon moon." The ship shuddered as reality reasserted itself. Stars appeared on the view screen, solid and unchanging. Normal space spread out before them, and there, floating in the darkness, was their destination. The beacon moon was small, barely 20 kilometers in diameter. Its surface was cratered and barren, looking exactly like thousands of other unremarkable moons throughout the galaxy. Nothing about it suggested the power hidden within its core. "We made it," Mason said, relief washing over him. "Not yet," Lyra cautioned. "The beacon must still be activated and the Vorsek follow close behind." As if summoned by her words, the sensors detected multiple fold space disturbances. The hunters were emerging all around them. A dozen Vorsek ships appeared, their angular black hulls bristling with weapons. The Astralis descended toward the moon surface, moving as fast as its damaged systems would allow. The Vorsek opened fire, energy beams cutting through space around The ship's automatic defenses redirected power to shields, but they could not withstand a prolonged assault. There, Lyra pointed to a dark crater near the moon's north pole, the primary beacon access point. Mason guided the ship toward the crater, the neural connection showing him exactly where to land. The Astralis touched down with a gentle thud, settling onto the airless surface of the small moon. The Vorsek will not risk destroying the moon, Lyra said. Their orders will be to capture the beacon intact. They will send ground forces. How much time do we have? Mason asked. Minutes at most, Lyra replied. We must hurry. The ship's airlock opened, revealing the cratered surface beyond. Lyra handed Mason another of the silvery environmental suits, like the one he had worn to remove the tracker. This will protect you, she explained. The atmosphere inside the beacon chamber is toxic to humans. Mason pulled on the suit while Lyra prepared for the surface. Her own body needed no protection. The Eldrith physiology adapted easily to extreme environments. Ember, too, required no suit, his scales providing all the protection he needed. Together, they stepped out onto the surface of the beacon moon. The gravity was minimal, allowing them to move in long, bounding strides toward the center of the crater. Mason followed Lyra, watching as she approached what appeared to be an ordinary boulder. The Queen placed her hand on the rock surface, and it responded instantly, the stone rippling like water, revealing a passage that led deep below the surface. The Vorsek ships have landed. Ember clicked the message, translated through Lyra's connection with Mason Hunter's approach from the south.